Welcome back. We've been discussing financial literacy and the important lessons on money management that are not necessarily taught in school. I'm joined by one of America's best-known personal finance gurus, Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, which advocates breaking out of the rat race by investing in real estate and other businesses to build wealth. And actually an interesting point that came to me just as I was thinking about the show, Robert, is does the financial literacy or does the skill and the potential skill that can be acquired depend on a person's culture? Do you find variations in the culture of people, the way they approach this?
Yeah, I would definitely say so, but more than just culture, I would say from economic class. If you come from a poor family, what I'm saying is pure heresy. And if you come from an academic family like my family, all PhDs, it's academic heresy. And for the rich, they go, what's so hard about this? So it's not so much about ethnicity or anything like this, because every country has its rich and its poor and middle class, but it's just really what economic class you come from.
What is the conspiracy you refer to in the latest book? When you talk about the conspiracy of the rich, basically, what do you see that to be?
Well, conspiracy of the rich is in two parts. The first part is the history of how we got here, because it didn't just start with this real estate stuff. It's been going on for centuries. For centuries, the rich have always exploited the poor. So the first part of the book is a little bit of history, because if you can see history, you can see the future. And the second part is how guys like me get out of this mess by printing our own money. See, if the real thing is the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913 was formed against the wishes of the U.S. Constitution. The Federal Reserve Bank is not federal. It is owned by the richest European families in the world. It is not a bank. It has no reserves. It has the power to print money as much as it likes. So let's say it issues, it prints $1 billion. That money, they just wrote a check for it. It doesn't exist. It's like just making it up. But they want the interest from the taxpayers to pay the interest on that debt. And that's really what it's about, is about why this economy is collapsing, is because they just started pushing the world into greater and greater debt. And around the year 2002, they started giving home loans to people with no jobs, no income, just to get them to borrow money to keep the economy afloat. But that's 2002 is just a symptom of 1913. So that's the first part of the book, and the second part of the book is how I play according to the rules of the rich. So I'm not against the Federal Reserve Bank. I mean, they're giving me a lot more money now than ever before, but they're not giving it to the poor and middle class. It's tragic.
Interesting you say about getting out of the rat race and building sort of independent wealth here. We had a question from through Twitter from a viewer who uses the name Falky8773. It says, how and where would the few who control the world find people to be their subordinates if everyone had an empire?
Well, they do it in Conspiracy of the Rich. I write about the conspiracy against the U.S. education system. In 1904, a man named John D. Rockefeller took over the financial education system with a thing called the General Education Board. And then they dictated what the government taught kids in school. So the way they had to do it was one of the ways, not only taking over the banks, but they had to take over the school system. So when you see stuff like that, you'll understand kind of what's going on. And that's why Conspiracy of the Rich, the first part is history. The second part is how guys like me play by the rules of the rich, which is different than going to school and getting a job. They're very different worlds.
Well, there was a viewer from the Philippines who wrote in for the show a question for you, or comment, from Abdul Ghani Salapuddin, who wrote in saying, being poor or rich is a matter of choice, not destiny. Our destiny is in our hands. It is up to us to pursue it, to make it happen. But surely not everyone has the same opportunity, do they, Robert?
No, but they don't have it if they're financially uneducated. Like the average person is working, in America, they're working for the U.S. dollar. All over the world, the reserve banks of the world, like the Bank of Japan and all that, are dumping the dollar. And yet people are still working for the dollar. That's why if you read in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I say the rich don't work for money. The rich acquire assets. And so how can a person know anything if they're not financially educated? And they think, well, all I have to do is make more money. Well, what good sense does it make to make more money when the Federal Reserve is printing trillions of dollars? That's financial stupidity. Why work for money when the Fed can print it automatically? That's all I'm saying. Why do that? Why save it? Why save it when they're printing it? I don't know.
What went through your head when the stimulus package and President Obama's sort of attempt to try and put the economy back on track? What went through your mind when you heard about what was going on?
Well, if you read Conspiracy of the Rich, it's on target, on schedule. That's what they're going to do every time. That's what FDR did. That's what Hitler did. That's what Mao Zedong did. It's been done throughout history. It's repeating itself again and again. And, you know, like I think Obama's going to come up with what was known as the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, to get people to go back to work, or the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. The way Obama's going to flood the market with money is create these funny jobs, like in the name of the green environment. You can see it now. They're giving people incentives to insulate their homes and all this, but that's the way they get money, funny money, into the system. And you'll see it happening again. History does repeat.
Well, in that, you know, people talk about financial markets, the global markets being in cycles, you know, the bear and bull markets basically going up and down. How does the state of the market play with what you advise? I mean, what should people be watching out for if they're going to follow your advice?
Well, again, in Conspiracy of the Rich, you've got to understand history. In 1913, the Federal Reserve Bank was formed. In 1944 was the Bretton Woods Agreement. The Bretton Woods Agreement basically required all the countries of the world to join the World Bank and the WTO. And to do that, the World Trade Organization, they had to copy the Fed system. And then like the Bank of Japan, they have to store U.S. dollars. Bank of China stores U.S. dollars. And then in 1971, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. That was the biggest, you know what, in history. And suddenly the U.S. could now flood the world with funny money. So all the people who are saving U.S. dollars, they're going, what happened? You know, the dollar is dropping in value like a rock, but that's the way the U.S. can pay off its bills. And that's what's happening. So that's why I'm saying to people, you have to learn to use debt. In most financial pundits, they get out of debt. If you're not in debt, you're not playing the game. And then that's why gold and silver are more important today.
Interesting, and just in our live station chat room, there are people around the world discussing this as we go out live. Petros in Cyprus says, don't save, just spend. I disagree with that. If I want a holiday this summer, I wouldn't get it by spending, but saving.